We are going to talk about India much the same way we did about China, and look at the overall picture about the development of governance in India. One of the first things that we have to understand when we're talking about India is historically this is not just the modern day nation state, but rather it's a region that also encompasses Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, Pakistan, and up even into Afghanistan. This is one of the most geographically diverse regions of the world. Starting in the north, we have the highest mountains in the world, the Himalayas. Just to the west of the Himalayas are the Karakoram, and then finally the Hindu Kush. And together, these mountains are really going to serve as, if not a full barrier, at least a very good barricade to create different cultural zones to the north of the Himalayas, in what would be the Central Asian steppe, and to the south, the region that we're going to talk about today. India also has many fruitful river valleys. The two major ones in the east is going to be the Ganges River Valley, and in the west, the Indus River Valley. Now, I know the Indus River Valley doesn't look like much in this particular image, but in the historical past, this looked very similar to what we see in the Ganges. We'll look at a little bit about the economic and ecological degradation that's going to bring about the change. The importance about these river valleys is that they're going to serve as the center of population. This is where the vast majority of the large empires are going to have their bases of operation, where they're going to start their spread. Control of these regions are going to be extremely important for control over the rest of India. Further to the south, in the central regions, you have what's known as the Deccan Plateau. The interior is extremely hilly, and the coast extremely fertile. Especially among the coast, you see a pretty densely populated region. However, each of these regions moving from the coast inland are really different climatically as well as geographically. And so it's going to lead to the development of different cultural identities in each of those regions. Finally, when we get to the extreme south, we have the large island of Sri Lanka, which is once again extremely mountainous. And so the importance of talking about all this geography is to understand that different geographical regions are going to give birth to different sociological zones. That is, the people who develop in these regions are going to have different ways of survival, are going to understand the world differently because the way they need to survive their particular circumstances are going to be different. And so with that understood, what we have to understand is the modern idea of India is just that, a modern idea. And historically, not do we only have all these different geographical zones, we have different linguistic zones, different religious zones, different zones of identity based on the ability to survive in these different regions. The first development of civilization in India probably came to a head around the third millennia before the Common Era, in what is generally known as the Indus River Valley Civilization, but what we also sometimes refer to as the civilizations of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, based off the names of the two largest cities in this region. It is the responsibility of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro that we tend to ascribe the degradation of the Indus River civilization and the Indus River Valley as a whole. Basically, these two cities and the hundreds of other affiliated cities, it's not a full empire, just affiliated cities in a cultural zone, were very effective as merchants. And it seems that one of their main crops was cotton. The thing about cotton is it has very high water needs. And so while you do not lead to immediate degradation of the environment through the planting of cotton, when this continues over century and even into millennia, in fact, the Indus River Valley civilization is believed to exist all the way until about 1500 to 1000 before the Common Era. But when you have that much use of the agricultural land using such a water-heavy crop like cotton, what that means is eventually it's going to lead to a situation where not only can you no longer grow cotton, but you cannot grow any other items as well. Eventually, Harappa and Mohenjo-daro are going to fall. Not by any sort of internal warfare. In fact, we have not found any evidence that either Harappa or Mohenjo-daro or any of these other affiliated city-states actually took part in war. There are none of the usual signs, such as metal smelting sites, that show that they would have been making weapons. Instead, their demise is going to be brought by invasion from the outside. We tend to ascribe the final demise of the Indus River Valley civilization to a people known as the Aryans, a nomadic people who entered into India via the Khyber Pass sometime between 1500 and 1000 before the Common Era. While it was probably military exploits that brought a final end to these earliest civilizations in India, we can understand that they were already fully in decline by the time the Aryans got there. How do we know this? Well, the Aryans passed through and kept moving on. And the reason for this is because even the people themselves had already abandoned these cities, and there was no real way to establish nor to maintain a society in this dying region. Instead, the Aryans continued to spread across all of India until they eventually settled down, giving up the nomadic lifestyle and picking up a lifestyle of agricultural production. This is what's going to give birth to the Mauryan Empire. The Mauryan Empire is going to be the first major Indian empire that is able to unite large sections of the Indian subcontinent. Prior to this period of time, we either have situations like the Indus Valley River civilization that created autonomous but linked city-states, or we had petty little political states spread all across the Indian landmass. The Mauryans are going to be successful in that they're able to use their base of operations, which was along the Ganges River Valley, and from there, using that demographic might, spread across first the rest of northern India, and then deeper down into the south. What gave the Mauryans their first claim to fame is they are going to be the ones responsible for getting rid of the remnants of the Greeks, administrators and soldiers that had left behind by Alexander in his conquests. Moving forward a couple of generations, the height of the Mauryans came during the reign of Ashoka. And unlike his predecessors that had used the philosophy of the Arthashastra, that is, very similar to the concept of legalism in China, in order to rule with an iron fist, Ashoka ruled through the use of Buddhism, doing his best to operate in a humanitarian way in order to improve the lives of his subjects. That isn't to say that he didn't continue to expand. He did, but the idea was to create a situation within inside the borders of his empire that would allow his subjects to reach the state of nirvana. However, what we tend to see happening in India is these periods of longevity of political stabilization do not last very long. And so it's very much the opposite of China, where we have short periods of political unity and long periods of political disorganization. And once again, during those periods in between the large empires, we have the development of smaller political states scattered all throughout India. I don't want to move from empire to empire in India at this point, but just to cover some highlights. The next major group to rule over a large section of India will be the Kushan Empire. This again will be a people that come from outside of the Indian landmass and settle inside of India, eventually reaching to the Ganges River. One of the important things that's going to happen during the Kushan Empire is the spread of Buddhism outside of India and into the wider Asian world. Just like the Aryans before them, the Kushans are going to face some of the same problems. A degradation of political ability by the leadership, a declining economy, and pressures from outside groups. Just as we've seen in other areas due to the pressures of core versus periphery. Once again, a unified dynasty will establish itself under the authority this time of internal Indian control, but as you can see, even though they are able to hold on for about a couple of centuries, they too will decline in very much similar ways. The importance that comes after the Gupta dynasty here is that from this point on, we really see external invaders being those who are going to maintain the longest periods of political cohesion in India until the modern day. One of these important groups are going to be the Ghazni. The Ghazni are a Muslim group that, leaving the caliphate from the west, are going to make their way into Afghanistan and set up their own petty state there. Now, the overall importance of the Ghazni isn't that they're going to last very long, but they're going to introduce the concept of political Islam into India. In this period of time, it is going to become acceptable for Muslims to rule over Hindus. Now, this doesn't mean that there won't be Hindu rule. There will, and it will move back and forth. But again and again, we will see the establishment of strong Muslim dynasties within India as time goes on, including the Tughlaq dynasty of 1320 to 1413. Now, I bring this one up not because I want to spend a lot of time on it, but again, to represent the normative period of stabilization in India, 1320 to 1413. That's as long as the Tughlaq are able to establish their strength. And if you notice, even though they will have control over most of India, there are pockets, those crossed in blue lines, that will still be able to maintain their independence. The last of the major dynasties of India will be the Mughal dynasty. The Mughal dynasty is again an external invader. They will make their way into India from Central Asia and set themselves up first in the region of Delhi and then spreading from there. By this time, the acceptance of Islam and the acceptance of the practitioners of Islam as leaders has been accepted in India. And so though the Mughals are Muslim, they are seen as inherently Indian. And so again, they're a little bit more successful than those who come before them, but just as what happened to all the previous dynasties that I briefly spoke about, after a short period of political unity, after a short period of having very effective leaders, the Mughals are going to face the same problems we've seen time and time again. They'll hold on until 1739 as a strong power, but after 1739, even though they'll be around all the way until the 1900s, at that point, other Indian groups basically just pay them lip service. They say, great, you're here, we're just going to do what we want to do. And that will remain the situation until eventually the British Empire comes in and takes over as the next main power in India.